Y'all, I'm so glad to have you back today to listen to the rest of Billy and Jaime Thomas's story. I know that they are an inspiration to you, and y'all, they share the hard stuff. They share authentically and real about the struggles that they've had. So I'm excited for you to listen, and I know that you'll learn from my wise friends, Billy and Jaime Thomas.
Plant a seed, no one knows what it will be. Watch it grow, watch it grow, watch it grow, watch it grow. Your small beginning.
So we had never wanted to work for a religious planted organization. And our school in China had been originally a plant by a religious organization. The Chinese government knew it. But I just remember our daughter, as a result of that, being around people who prayed and watching it rub off on her. And ultimately, it was that, and then Jaime and I praying with her every night, that I think I kind of credit with the result of our second child. So we, as Jaime said, had a hard time having a child, and naturally. And one day, this was in May, Jaime walks out of our oldest daughter's room just laughing. And I said, "What's so funny?" She said, "Well, she prayed for a little sister tonight, that God would put a baby in my belly, but that it would be her belly." Because in what we had taught her, that any baby growing in somebody's belly, motherhood didn't necessarily mean this, that you grew the baby in her belly.
Right.
So she wanted a baby, and she wanted Jamie's belly to grow it. And we just laughed. We had a laugh about that. But she was adamant that she was going to pray to Jesus to give our family another baby. Well, lo and behold, 3 or 4 weeks later, Jaime went in for tonsillitis. And told the ENT, she said, they were giving her all this medication. She said, "Would you give me this medication if I was pregnant?" She's like, "I don't think I am. I've had kind of a stressful month." And the ENT's like, "Well, no." And so she did this, test right there in the office. And of course, it was an ENT. It wasn't a OBGYN. It wasn't anybody. This ENT lady tells Jaime that she's pregnant. And Jamie's sobbing, in the office. And
it was actually a very sweet story, because the ENT said, "I never get to tell people this kind of news. Is it good news?" And I was crying. I said, "It's a miracle." And she's like, "This is so fun. I never get to do this." Yeah. So it was really sweet. But
wow.
Yeah, I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks later. We certainly in no way were trying to have, we had just previously, that was May, the Christmas before that, we had decided, we had thought a lot about an adoption again and really prayed a lot about it, and had come to the conclusion that, we were not going to pursue that we were, happy with just one child, and that is how we would be, and God had different plans, and our daughter had different plans. So, and we were really nervous about it, because I'd been pregnant many times. It was never an issue of getting pregnant. It was always an issue of carrying a baby to term. And so, of course, we were excited about getting pregnant, but certainly cautious, and didn't want to put too much, of our, of our heart into it. I don't know. And this pregnancy was without any complications. It was just a textbook, quote unquote, easy pregnancy, if you can call pregnancy easy, and full term. And, we all thought it was going to be a boy. We were all convinced it would be a boy. And our oldest daughter was like, "Nope, I prayed for a little sister. It's going to be a girl." And you know what? We have another daughter. So
thank you, God.
But I think, I share that because I think it's funny that we have these, whether we speak or not, we have these subconscious no's. Well, I could never do that, or I don't want to do that. And all the times in our life that we've been willing to let God challenge those no's, what's come out on the other side has been amazing. And whether it was for me the no to live this international life, whether it was the no to move to China, whether it was the no to go back to church, right, which we never thought we'd do, which we did in Malaysia, whether it was the no to to work for an organization that was a ministry created organization. And all the times we've allowed God to push up against the no's, what's come out on the other side has been just amazing. And that's kind of where we are now, which is that we had a plan. We were supposed to be in China for 2 more years, so this year and then next year.
So we said we were going to stay in China. We have a really amazing life in China. We've got an amazing community and
great
jobs. Yeah, and we said, okay, we're going to stay in China until our youngest child is old enough to go to school, and then we're going to start to pray and see, do we stay here? Do we not? Where's God leading us to next? And it was last summer, so summer of 2019, that Billy just started to say, I really feel like God's calling us to leave China. And I was like, no, we're supposed to stay until our youngest child's school aged, and that's our plan. And I don't know.
I think Jaime had chalked it up to the fact that I had had a very difficult semester professionally. And she had just said, look, you're just coming out of a place of exhaustion. Why don't you just continue to pray? And I don't think that. So let's just put a pause on that. You just continue to pray and
we'll just stick a pin in it. and then the school year started, and Billy just again said, I'm really feeling like God's calling us to leave. And again, I pushed him and I said, I feel like you may be feeling this out of a place of discontent, that you're feeling frustrated professionally, that, that you're not feeling content. And I really challenged him to find contentment in where he was.
This place.
Yeah, find contentment in this place. And then he challenged me, as in any good marriage, to pray and see what God is telling our family. To pray, are we supposed to leave God? What do you want for our family? And so we agreed that night. We made like a handshake, and said, okay, you'll focus on this and pray through this, and I'll focus on this and pray through that. And honestly, I thought for sure, I walked away from that handshake and I was like, great, Billy's going to start having a better attitude and it's going to be all good. And God's going to very clearly tell me, like, your plan, Jaime, is what it's supposed to be. You're hanging out there until your youngest child is in school age. And it did not work out that way.
Well, part of it did. I think Jaime was right in challenging me that if you can't find joy where you are, moving isn't going to solve that problem.
Amen.
And I think that that's something that I would want to say to a lot of people. We don't live this life because we're unsettled. We live this life because we listen to what God's calling us. And for us, for Billy and Jaime Thomas and our family, currently that means overseas life. And I say currently very pointedly, because I know people that are loving God and serving God and are doing it in their neighborhoods and in their places. And this is not by any means you've got to run away from your problems, because I would never want anybody to get that from our story. Because I don't feel that we're running away from our problems. And that's what Jaime challenged me to at the beginning of the school year was, look, if you don't buckle down and find joy now, here, she's like, I'm not taking my family anywhere with you. And I said, okay, I'll do that. I'll take a deep breath. I'll go run more. I'll work out more, clear my head, spend some more time with God. I'll find joy. But I need you to know that this is not, I don't think this is just from a place of discontentment. This is a nudge. This is a call. And can you pray as well? And we kind of pinned it, and then it was about a month later.
I put in a lot of prayer, and very clearly the message that I kept getting was not that we should go. It was not that we should stay. It was that I needed to let my husband lead my family. Which for me was a really hard message.
For the record, that's a
God.
hard message for me too. If you've been listening to our story, you can understand that that was a hard message for me. I actually didn't know that that was the message at first.
Yeah, it very clearly, and I would hear that, and I would say, so, but does that, like, do you want us to leave, God? And he never ever, still to this day, has never given me a clear message of, yes, leave China. No, stay in China. It has always come down to let your husband lead your family. Have faith and belief that your husband is focused on me and allow him to lead. And
So are you hearing this in your thoughts as you're in times of prayer? Because I know people will wonder, like, how do you hear?
yeah, absolutely. I heard it in a multitude of areas, and it's funny in one of them especially, definitely through my prayer, through opening the Bible and just saying, what do you want me to hear? Even through, I have a little daily devotion, and through that, oftentimes when I would say, okay, I would wake up in the morning and it would really be on my mind, really pressing, and I'd open that devotion and lo and behold, it's about something having to do with that. Okay, God. And then in this time, I had a good friend of mine who months before that had asked me to do this running challenge with her. And I was like, yeah, not a runner, thank you. Have fun with that. And then it was a 3-month challenge, and those 3 months passed, and she asked me again, and I said, well, I'll think about it, but still I'm not a runner. And 3 months passed, and then it came the beginning of the 2019 school year, and she asked again, and I said, okay, fine. I wanted to just prove to myself that I could do it, even though I very greatly dislike running. And it was around that same time that Billy challenged me to really pray about God's plan for us and staying in China or not. And so I was running almost every day. Basically, it was a challenge to run a certain amount in these 3 months. And I made a playlist that was my running playlist that was all worship music, so that I could not only prove to myself that I could run this amount, and of course health benefits, but that I could also use this time as a time of worship and a time of just communion with God.
Yes.
Because I felt like, win-win-win, right?
Yes.
And so it was the same worship music every time I ran, and even after a while, the music becomes kind of background noise, if you will. And I really was able to use that time of running to be time that I spoke my thoughts to God. Sometimes it was, oh my gosh, I'm still running, this is really hard. And sometimes it was God, what are we supposed to do? Billy's saying this, and what do you want us to do? And to hear his thoughts come back at me. So I would say the majority of it was through that. And I think it's funny because I learned through that running that I still don't like running. But those 3 months, it was like that running challenge I needed to do at that time in that moment, even if it was only for that.
Yes, the special communion time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so the majority of my time of hearing him was through running a park in our neighborhood, around and around and around. And yeah, the message I should say that I kept getting was, let your husband lead your family, let your husband lead your family. And I remember in October, I came to him and I said, okay, I guess, all right, we're going to do this. And we were in a position where in the international teaching world, for the most part, you give up your job before you have a job. And so that's tough. It is
faith.
Yeah, whether you are a believer or not, it is a step of faith, right? There are situations where you could have a job beforehand, but it's few and far between. And so yeah, we did. We jumped out on that faith and said, okay, we're going to listen. We're going to go, even though it doesn't make any sense, right? Even though we have this great life and our kids are doing well, and here we go. And Billy resigned, still to finish out the school year, but resigned for the next
Turned
school
in my
year.
notice, yeah.
and we went on the recruiting trail, if you will, to find out what God had in store next. We had no idea, and we really were open at this point. I'd learned better than to say, God, I'm not going there.
Where was the other place besides China you didn't want to go?
It's aspects of the Middle East.
Okay.
There's just parts of the Middle East that we have friends who've been there, have been great, but parts of the Middle East with a young daughter that I'm just conscious of what she sees in the culture.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
but this time we really were like, okay, God, where are you taking us?
Yeah,
and we really didn't have, we had a desire in our hearts. We'd been in Asia for almost 10 years, and we had a desire in our hearts that really felt like maybe it was time to go somewhere new and somewhere different. But we were still, if God had a place in Asia for us, okay. But other than that, it was, we knew, we sat down as a family, we sat down even with our oldest daughter, and we said, okay, God's calling us to leave, and so this is going to be our last year in China. What, in a new place, what does your heart want? And we sat together as a family and talked about that and came up with things like we wanted to have easy access to nature, real God-created nature, not like groomed parks, or whatever. And we wanted to, our daughter wanted to go to a school that didn't wear uniforms.
Which are not that common.
Right. But our daughter said very specifically that she wanted to go somewhere where she could learn Spanish, which was really surprising to us. And we had certain aspects in schools that we were hoping for.
Yeah, professionally.
Yeah.
We're certainly looking for things.
And we kind of just let that be our guide, but also just kind of being open. And again, we didn't make this choice. I didn't say in October, okay, we're going. And then it was all sunshine and roses. It wasn't. It was hard.
No, I think maybe that's, as I'm reflecting on it, I think this decision to follow God every step of the way, it's been you make this decision to follow, and then you think, okay, I'm listening to Jesus, everything's going to roll out. And it's no, I'm listening to Jesus. Now the work begins. Yes. Now the battle begins. And, I just think that that's a misconception a lot of people have. I was just kind of this morning thinking through and praying, and I think a lot of people have this notion that a life of faith is a life without fear. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's true. I don't think that's biblical. I think that the Bible has too many verses that say, don't be afraid, or don't worry, or don't be scared, or cast your troubles, for us to acknowledge that a life of faith is a life where you're daily battling fear.
Yes.
And I think it's people who are searching for this, fearless life that aren't necessarily searching for a faith-filled life, because a faith-filled life is going to terrify you. Mm-hmm. And you're going to be confronted with a lot more when you listen to God than I think you would if you just said, I didn't hear that voice.
That's so good, Billy.
Yeah.
Be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. Be strong and very courageous.
Yeah.
And I think that there's over 80 times in the Bible, I just pull that out of my hat because that it says, do not fear.
Right. Well, because I think you pull it out of your hat because you're somebody like us who, when you're living this life of what's next, what's the next step, then you have to know where those verses are, because that's what you're telling yourself when you're running, or when you're stressed, or when you're broken, or when you've lost everything, when you don't want to step foot in the church. It's those verses. For us, it's this verse in James, God blesses those who endure the trials that are before him. Well, guess what? That means that when you're with him, guess what you have, right? And I just think that's how it is. We made this decision to move on, and then we entered into maybe one of the hardest 90, 100 days or so of our marriage, certainly, and of our professional career.
Hey y'all, I wanted to tell you about something I've been planning for you. I kept hearing God tell me, Bring my people a refreshing. And so, y'all, I've planned a virtual retreat for you. It's going to be on September 4th, 2020, on a Friday, and it's Central Time from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And it's going to have 3 different parts to it. I will have a live audience with me at my Acts 1-8 Blessing Studio in Wimberley, Texas. But I will be making it live for you via Zoom, and it's going to have 3 parts. One will be spiritual practice of hearing God's voice. The second part will be writing prompts to release the power of your creative words that you hear. And the third part, of course, is painting. So at home, you can use watercolor, crayon, oil, ink, pencil, whatever you have, y'all. The verse that God has given me for this day specifically is from Psalm 126, verse 4. And it says, "Now, Lord, do it again. Restore us to our former glory. May streams of your refreshing flow over us until our dry hearts are drenched again." So y'all, if you need a refreshing, you need a flow from God, then you need to join us. The link is in the show notes, and I can't wait for you to join us virtually on September 4th, 2020.
Yeah, it was not an easy task for me as a wife to hear, let your husband lead. Not that I hadn't, let him lead or whatever, but, in all these big decisions in our life, it was me pushing to go overseas and Billy worrying about that. It was just so many different things where I didn't feel like I necessarily led, but I felt like God was giving me the clear messages of this is where I'm calling.
You had a lot
guys.
of input.
Yeah, and so this was it. It took a lot of humility on my part, which I probably needed. I did, and it took a lot of faith, faith both in my God and in my husband.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, standing on this end of it, I can see I so needed that. We needed that in our marriage. I needed that as a person. But, back in October, it was a hard thing to do. And through those few months, there were times, because he is human, where Billy made mistakes, where Billy, for a moment, lost his faith in God saying this is our plan, and made choices that really strongly impacted both of us. And in those times, I was left with the choice to go, see, God, you should have just given me the message. You should have, I'm like, just tell me like you did before. Or to go, okay, my husband's human. God's given me this clear message. If God has said, let your husband lead, God knows, he knows that we're going to make mistakes, but he's going to be faithful through it. And that's what I had to choose. I had to choose that. Because
what
I could
a test.
Yeah.
So if I chose the other one, it would be nothing but anger and hurt in our marriage, fractures in our marriage, and hurt for our children, right? And so it was a lot of growth.
Well, what Jamie's talking about is I think one of the biggest moments for me, professionally. I don't want to say mistakes, but probably. So what happened was I didn't know that God was telling Jamie to follow me. Jamie told me, okay, let's go, because she knew that was the message I was getting. And then she went. A friend of hers had invited her on a birthday cruise in the Mediterranean. And so Jamie was able to go, and it was this beautiful thing. And this was a girl that's in our community, and it's just poured into our lives, and we love. She's come to visit us in China, and so it was this great chance for Jamie to go. And while Jamie's on the boat, she drops this bombshell on me, because I said, "I'm so glad that God called you to leave." She said, "Oh, he didn't call me to leave. He called me to follow you." And so I think, like a lot of men I know, I live in this place of fear of failing my family. And all of a sudden, the roles aren't just reversed in the sense that I'm telling her, like in China, we should listen to God. But professionally, what Jaime does as an educator is a specialized field, and she's excellent at it. So we've always been recruited for what she brings to a school. And then I was an English teacher, which we grow on trees. There's thousands of us all over the world. I feel like I was a good one. I did it very well, but again, for a school looking to staff that position, there's a lot of options. Professionally, we're in this place where my job is now in front, and it's my reputation and my name. And I knew what Jamie's reputation was. I knew what Jamie's name was, but I wasn't sure about mine. And so I reacted out of fear. I tried to get control over a situation that God didn't want me to have control over. And ultimately what I did was, the recruiting agency that we had used for years had a storehouse of confidential references. And this is a ethical gray area for international educators and international administrators, and in a sense of, I as an administrator have access to all of my personnel files. I could know if so-and-so gave Jaime a great reference, or if so-and-so gave me a bad reference. And the advantage to knowing that is that in an interview, if I knew that someone had said something bad about me, I can get out in front of it. I can proactively look at it. And I say it's an ethical gray area because you'll meet some people who say, oh, it's not that big of a deal, everyone does it. And then you'll meet people who say, that was a confidential reference, you have no business knowing it. I want to pause really importantly, because when I shared with Jaime that I had done it, she was really clear that as believers, there's no room for us to live in the gray. Mm-hmm. She was really clear that it doesn't matter if this person did it or not. They're not telling people they're following Jesus. You have to be above reproach. So I did it. I accessed it. I told Jaime after the fact that I had done it. She was upset. But ultimately, the company found out. They contacted our school that we were working with, and I had an ethical violation written up in my file. They were doing a full investigation. It could span everything from this ethical violation to a potential losing my job. And that was a long week when I came home and told her that. And it came from a place, again, of fear. I rationalized it where saying, okay, my family's following me, they're relying on me, I need to know. The more I know, the more I can control. God's called me in this. Okay, cool, God, thanks for the call. Now let me do it. And that's not the way he works. And that week broke me as a person in a way that I needed to be broken. And we entered into about 90 days from that week before we got the job, where every time it felt like we had something going with the school that ticked all of our boxes, it fell apart. And ultimately, we went in what is considered very late in the recruiting season, which was into the new year in January, and we still didn't have jobs. And the first week back in January, I sent an email. I think there was only 2 or 3 schools that I had applied to that I still hadn't heard no from, and I would get far, and then things wouldn't work out. But I sent an email, and within 10 minutes, the school got back to me. And they were like, yeah, of course we want to interview you. We've just, not everyone works on the Asia timeline. And so we wound up interviewing and coming through that. But Jaime talked about music, and I remember distinctly music playing an important role for me in this. And there were 2 things that really stood out for me. After I had made this mistake and I thought I had almost lost my job, I thought every interview I do from here on out, when they call to get a reference from my current school, they're going to bring this up. This is fresh on everyone's mind. I thought, I'm doomed. There were 2 things that really kept me going. The first was when I enter into a place of despair with the Lord. And there's a lot of times in prayer when I don't know what to say. I just habitually pray the Lord's Prayer over and over again. And there could be days or weeks when we lost our babies, when we failed adoption, and that's all I know to say to God is the Lord's Prayer. And I remember walking the dog one morning and just going through the Lord's Prayer. And this was maybe mid-November. And getting stuck on the phrase, this day. Give us this day our daily bread. Give us this day. And I was worrying about 2021 and 2022 and 2023. And I wasn't worried about what I needed on November whatever day. And that prayer just grounding me into, okay, recruitment-wise, it takes a while. What do I need this day? Well, I need a school to email me back. And I did. I changed my prayers to focus on this immediacy. That was one thing. And then over Christmas, I heard a song that I'd heard before, but it just sat with me, where I was feeling like I had so completely messed up my family's future. And I heard this song, this old 2011 song by the Newsboys, God's Not Dead. I didn't kill him. God's not dead. And it just became my anthem, my tear-soaked anthem through everything. God's not dead. He's not dead in my marriage, which was rocky, right? I had just jeopardized our entire professional career in a moment of fear. Where the first time in our life where God had told my wife, follow your husband, I had greatly messed it up. And then God's like, but I'm not dead. That's what you need to hear from this. I'm not dead. Why are you thinking that I'm dead because you made a mistake? In your mistake is my greatest moment to shine through you. And that's what he did.
Grace, grace.
And I think the cool thing that came out of that is that every job interview after that, Billy and I talked a lot about it, and he sought wisdom from other professionals that he respected. And every job interview after that, Billy told that person in this very first interview exactly the mistake he had made, what he had learned from it.
That was hard.
We interviewed together, right? I was there for that first one. It is hard. It's hard in any situation to admit mistake, but the interesting thing is that every single one of those interviews are schools that we either got to the very final round or we ended up getting job offers from.
So this purity, this honesty, this truth wins every time.
Every time. Wow.
Yeah. I think we think integrity is not making mistakes.
No.
But integrity is admitting your mistakes and how you're changing and growing from them.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lord. Yeah. So you haven't said where you're going yet. Do you want to?
So that's actually...
So our daughter will get to learn Spanish without question. So we are moving to Bogota, Colombia, to a really amazing school there that we are just so excited about and that we would have never expected, and that ticks more boxes than we even knew we had. And we don't go into it believing it is this perfect place. We don't go into it believing that life will be easy, but we go into it knowing without question that God has led us there. And, it's funny, we signed our contracts, we got the job offer, we signed our contracts for these jobs, and a week...
7 days later. We signed it on Friday.
Yeah, 7 days later, we left for a Chinese New Year vacation. We left our house in Shanghai thinking we were just going to be gone a week for a vacation, and we have never been back.
It was 6 months ago.
Because COVID, right?
Yes.
That's when COVID hit China. That's when the whole world started to change, right? And so once again, right, like we've listened to God, we feel confident and know that God's leading us here, but we didn't listen, and then it was sunshine and roses, right? Because
and someone else had to pack all your belongings.
Absolutely, yeah. It's been, a time of a lot of grief, a time of a lot of loss. And it's funny because I told you in October when we decided we were going to leave, we sat our oldest daughter down. We wanted to do this transition right, and in the healthiest way. And we even contacted her school counselor that week and said, we decided we're going to leave. We want to make sure that we're going to transition her so beautifully. This is really the only school she's ever known. And she moved here when she just turned 3. So in many ways, it's the only home she's ever known. And so we want to make this transition as healthy and easy as possible. And then, you're leaving to go on a vacation and you will never return. So none of us, our daughter, ourselves, had have had the opportunity to say goodbye to friends, to say goodbye to our IE, who is like our family. Our dog is still in Shanghai and will remain there. He had to be rehomed. Our home, thank God for friends, for an amazing IE who went through our things and packed them up for us. Thank God for technology that's allowed for so much of this. But everything turns upside down. In the midst of that, at the beginning of all this, we lost my mom, who is an anchor for me and an anchor for my daughter. And, she passed away. And it's just been a time of, I think for everyone, certainly a lot of unknowns.
Yes.
But where, again, we were trying to, I guess, control this transition and make sure that it was healthy and good. And not that that's a bad thing, but it feels in many ways like God's just been like, I got you,
Yes.
right? Like, you can't control. We could have never known. None of us could have ever known what would happen in the world these last 6 months. And we would have never expected that this is what our transition would look like. And I'm not to say that I would choose this by any stretch, but we've learned resilience. We've learned how strong we can be and how important it is to lean into God and rely on Him and know that amongst a lot of grief, amongst a lot of unknown, we have that known, and that's Him, right? And even in small things, like our dog, right? My daughter loves our dog, and we'd only owned our dog a little over a year.
Yeah.
And we really hung on thinking they're going to change the rules. We'll be able to get him on a plane. We'll be able to get him here until the very last minute when we realized there was no way we were going to get him here to the States in time for us to go to Colombia, and came to the decision where we knew what's best for everyone is that he go to a new family. And it was hard. Our daughter cried. We cried. It was another hard piece of this transition. God, what in the world, right? What are you doing here? And a couple weeks after he went to his new home, he went to a home of my daughter's very best friend in China and a very dear friend of mine, her mom. And my daughter's best friend was adopted from China, and she had really been struggling over the last year with this, getting older, understanding what it means to have been adopted, and especially living in China with Caucasian parents. And she'd really, really been struggling over the last year with this idea of, was I ever wanted? Why was I abandoned? Who is this woman who did this? Why was I not loved? All of those things. And been really, really having a tough time. And we've been praying a lot for her through over a year, and praying a lot with her mom. And a couple of weeks after our tears of having to let go of our dog, her mom contacted me and said that her daughter had come in to the kitchen and just shared this amazing insight for an 8-year-old, and said, I realized that the way that Annabelle, our daughter, must feel about the dog and having to have given him to another family must be how my birth mom felt about me, in that Annabelle loves this dog. She didn't want to have to give him another home, but she knew that she couldn't provide for him. She couldn't give him all the things he needed. And so she chose us. And now we're loving him, and we're getting wonderful things. And she's like, I realized that must be it. That must be how my birth mother felt about me.
So beautiful.
And in that moment, I cried, and I said, okay, God. Yeah. Okay, God. If all of this had to lead to that, then awesome. Awesome. So even in the little things, right? Even in the things that are hard, and, beauty comes, right? So we're excited.
Wow, and it's next week, y'all.
1 week from today.
Week.
1 week from today. We were waiting. We got the email last night.
Wow.
And I think, There's this old, we talk about music now, this song's in my head too, this old Billy Graham quote at the beginning of an old DC Talk song where he says, people say, I've never seen God. And he says, this Billy Graham sermon says, I've never seen the wind, but I've seen the effects of the wind. Mm. And I think for us, that's what it is. No, I've never heard God's voice. Couldn't tell you what tone it's at, what timbre it's at. But I've seen the effects of listening. I've seen God work in other people's lives. I've seen God work in mine. I've seen God heal my marriage. I've seen him heal my family. I've seen him heal us. I've seen the effects of giving him my fears instead of controlling them on my own. And all of those things for me, that's why I guess we choose to get on a plane in 7 days with way too many pieces of luggage and go take our children to a country that they've never lived in, a place we've only spent 72 hours in, and go make a life there. And I know it'll work, not because we know Spanish or because we know Colombia or because we know how to navigate Bogota. I don't know how to order a pizza there. I don't know anything yet. I know it'll work because I know what it's like to be broken on my knees, weeping and saying, what next? Just help me take the next step. And that's been our story.
Wow. This is so amazing, y'all. God is just so with you. And if you've listened to my podcast, I have one final sort of question/statement that my mama would say. And you maybe have already answered it, but you maybe want to add a little bit more. And my mama would always say, how good can God be? Which is more like a statement. But do y'all have anything to say on the end of that?
So unexpectedly good. That's the cool part about it, right? Is that it's not just that he can be so good, but he can be so unexpectedly good. More than we could ever imagine. Yes. Good even when it doesn't feel like it's good around us. Yeah, so much more.
And the adventure is only just begun. Like, there's so much more.
Yeah.
There's so much more story. So when I come visit you in Bogota next year, prayerfully, I'll interview again and we'll have another episode.
We'll have another episode.
Yes, hopefully
to see what's happened.
Hopefully my Spanish will be much better. Yes.
Billy, do you have anything you want to add at the end?
I think, here's what I think. I think God's goodness, you say, how good can God be? God's goodness, when allowed, can redefine for us what good is. I think I went into life 20 years ago with a plan of what a good life was. And all of those plans don't exist. And what I have is so much better, so much sweeter, so much richer. And every time I allow him to redefine good in his terms, what I get out of it is more than I could have ever dreamed. And I think that for me is, how good can God be? It's as good as you want to let him be in your life.
Well, this has blessed me so much. And I love you so much. And I love your kids.
Thank you. We love you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Small Beginnings with Sarah. I pray you've been encouraged and inspired by the stories that you have heard today. Please follow me on my social medias, including Instagram at Acts18Blessings, Facebook at Acts18Blessings, and on my website, sarahthurman.com. You can help others start their own small beginnings by subscribing to my podcast and leaving a review. One sentence is wonderful, and it really helps share the word. And I want to leave you with one final question, and I hope you can answer it. How good can God be?